What's it like to experience discrimination in the healthcare system? What's it like to be the first Black man of power at a Canadian Museum of Human Rights? How do you navigate through some of the issues when you are the manager of visitor services and you have to deal with COVID? These are just some of the areas we're going to explore with my guest, Stanislas Bell, the manager of visitor spaces at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Stanislas, welcome to Humans on Rights.
Thank you, Stuart.
So listen, talk to me a little bit about, kind of introduce yourself a bit, maybe explain
For
what you
sure.
do, just so we can kind of put that out there for those people that are listening.
For sure. I've been in Canada for 12 years. I'm originally from Cameroon in Africa. My mom moved to Canada 12 years ago with three kids and a kid in her belly, so four kids in total. New culture, new weather, new people, new language. Only language we knew how to speak was French, and we had to learn everything from scratch. So when we came to Canada, specifically to Winnipeg, my mom wanted us to learn English. So she knew that with L'Oreal and DSFM, there was an opportunity for us to stay within the French community, and she didn't want that for us. So she moved outside of Winnipeg, about an hour away from Winnipeg, where I did a couple of years in high school. Then we came back to Winnipeg for university. I started in engineering for 2 years, then found out that it wasn't really what I wanted. I wanted to interact with humans on a consistent basis. I wanted to do something a bit more meaningful for the community, just in general. I wanted to be engaged in different businesses and things of that nature. So I started working for Airbnb, then moved to Skip the Dishes as a manager, and then got hired by the museum about 6 years ago, where I started as a team lead, then moved up to assistant manager, and then to the manager of the visitor services team.
So you had an interesting life coming into Canada, under first and foremost learning how to speak a second language, English. I mean, your first language being French. So you
Yeah.
learned to speak English. What was the experience, just kind of your initial reaction? Did you come right from Cameroon to Winnipeg, or did you have a stop in between?
We had stops in between, but we came directly. At that particular time, we went from Cameroon to Winnipeg, and it was brutal. I was 16 years old. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. My mom didn't have a job at that time when we arrived in Canada. There was nothing. So we were basically poor. We didn't have anything, no resources. We decided to change life. She wanted a different life for us, so we had to start over. And I remember just crying every night because I didn't want to be here. So she, as a very tactical move, what she decided to do was to make sure we would be close to school, about 2 minutes away from school. So we didn't have a choice. So she would say, you either go to school or you stay home. But it was basically the start of that new life, a new adventure.
And what brought your family from Cameroon to Winnipeg, Stanislaus? What would
For
be
sure.
the kind of the draw there?
So initially, the move was just to go to Canada. It was we go to Canada and we go to Montreal, we go to Quebec because we speak French. But when we did the application, we did it with my biological father. And what happened there is that because of a point system, we didn't qualify for Montreal because of his age and because of his application. So we got moved to Winnipeg. And my mom basically was we had a great life. My mom, she was a lawyer, a corporate lawyer. So we've always had a pretty wealthy life, until that move. She knew she needed something new, something different, and wanted us to explore a different reality in North America, see something different and learn English, because for her, that's the business language. That's how things start. So she wanted us to be exposed to a different reality, and she made a bet, and I can say it's a pretty successful bet.
Yeah, that's a lot, when you take on coming to a country, as you say, with three children and one on the way. So you've got four
Yeah.
children and not
Well,
necessarily coming to a job where you know you're going to have an income, and you've obviously all survived. And is your mother still in Winnipeg?
no, still in Winnipeg. She was here an hour ago. She's still here. She's still looking young, fresh, powerful, happy. Yeah. So I guess we turned things around and we got back to even a better reality than what we had before. Because, my siblings, everybody's working, everybody has a job, like a great job. And, we're all making a difference in the community in some way, shape, or form.
Would you say, as we speak today, Stanislaus, that you're happy in Winnipeg? Okay, this is taking a little too long to answer.
No. I have an answer. I am happy in Winnipeg. I'm just happy in general. I'm not a sad person. I'm happy in general. And I'm thankful for this city because it taught me so much, discipline, work. I had to go through the multitude of things that I guess as a 16-year-old, sometimes you're not supposed to see. But, I'm very thankful for the opportunities that I received in this city, just in general, from my job to all the people that I've met, all the knowledge that I've accumulated. It's been great. I love the city. I love the city. You don't even know how much I love it. That's why I paused for a second. I love it. And I'm so thankful.
It's great. No, thanks for that answer. So you're 16-year-old who just kind of want to sit in that world for a minute before we get into some of the specifics you're involved in today. So you're 16-year-old. Did you have an interest in music or sport, or is there something that you brought with you when you arrived in Canada and went, okay, this makes sense to me, or I can get involved in this area?
Yes, there was one thing, and that was pretty much the master key to all the doors that I opened when I was in high school. It was sports. Soccer in particular, because I was already a soccer champ. I was already a soccer genius when I came here. But I had to learn basketball, and I found that I was pretty good. I was pretty good. I was actually very good at some point, but pretty good, yeah. Soccer got me. It was kind of the language that I was speaking with the people on the field because I didn't speak a lick of English. I got accepted by, my classmates, by, all the people on the field was because of the talent I was displaying on the field.
Right. And did you learn then English simply by school, by attending school, or did you learn it through other ways, like through listening to Canadian music, or I shouldn't say Canadian, but English music?
Yeah, all of that. So school, music, movies. I changed my whole life, everything. Like my phone is in English. I would watch movies in English. When I was 12 years old, my mom made me read the dictionary, the French dictionary. So I had to start over and do the same thing in English. Same thing with the Bible in English. So I got exposed to that on a consistent basis.
So you're 16 years old, you come to Canada. You're not that happy at that time, but you've developed, you learn a lot, you get involved in a lot of sports stuff. You make some friends, you go to school.
Exactly.
And so here we are today in 2025. So you've been here for a number of years, Stanislav. Have you ever been back to Cameroon?
Yes, a couple of times. Yes.
Yeah. And do you notice things different when you go back and you see what you kind of left there when you think about as a 16-year-old, your memories, and when you go back, are they the same, different? What's the country look like to you now?
I would say it's the same and different at the same time. It's the same from what I see, but it's different from what I understand. When seeing things as a 16-year-old is different than seeing things as a 24, 25, or 26-year-old. So when I go back, even just the way people look at me is different. You know, they have they sort of look at me like I'm not from there, even though I'm from there. So I feel like I'm at home, but there's this new feeling. I remember a few years ago, I was explaining this to my mom. There's this feeling of not belonging. Like I don't belong anywhere because when I go back there, I'm not on the same wavelength. It's different mindsets, so they don't understand me. When I come here, when I'm in Canada, obviously I'm black. Discrimination, racism, all of that exists, and people look at me like, "Oh, he's not from here. He's from somewhere else." Almost feel like I don't belong anywhere. But in the end, today, when I'm 28, I understand things a bit differently. I feel like I belong everywhere. I don't think I'm necessarily from Cameroon, France, or even Winnipeg or Canada. I belong everywhere.
Yeah. So you're here 16, you speak French, you're a person of color. You've got to deal with learning English. You've got to deal with fitting into a society that is predominantly white. What did you kind of get a sense of the first time that you might have experienced discrimination, Stanislav?
It's a heavy question because before I got to the museum, for me, discrimination was more of a challenge. My mom raised us with the mindset of never finding excuses. Like you always take anything that life gives you and you make something positive out of it. So racism to me was a challenge. So I only understood what racism was when I got to the museum and started really learning about some of the things that were just inappropriate, disrespectful, and things of that nature, and learning about my history. Like I knew history, but not the same way that I learned it at the museum. But what I could say is that when me and my siblings came here in high school, I can already say, like I can say, like now that I'm looking at it, looking back at some of the things that classmates would say or some of the things that my friends would say. Some people thought it was funny to call me, the N-word, for example. When you don't understand the language, you're just trying to fit in. You're trying to make sure people like you for what you are. You don't care about all of that stuff. I remember a story where my brother came home and basically what he said was that they were in a circle, 7, 8 kids. And then the other 7 kids took turn and one at a time were just making fun of him. His skin color, his accent, his hair. And he sort of just stood there and told himself that one day I'll show you. And just like me, because he was good in sports, he got the respect of all his peers as a result. So it was basically the same thing for me, is that people would call me names, but at the time I wouldn't mind it because I knew I was part of the team. I was part of a group, and I was trying to fit in. I was trying to be accepted. But now looking back at it, I know that was definitely not okay. And if I had the knowledge that I have right now, I would have reacted differently, obviously.
Stanislas, you mentioned that we talked a little bit about discrimination in the healthcare system. You mentioned at one point that you almost died. Share that story if you don't mind, like how discrimination came in here, the human rights perspective that you bring to that conversation, and the fact that you're obviously a very, very great spirits person to share the story today.
No, for sure. I've been sharing this story for the last year, been invited, on different platforms and had different opportunities to share the story. So I'm very comfortable sharing the story. Basically, what happened is I went to Cameroon, on vacation. It was 2 years ago. And what happened is that one night while I was waiting for a friend at a bus stop, I got bitten by a mosquito. I didn't really think much of it at the time. And then over the next couple of weeks, I started to feel a bit off, low energy, strange sensation in my body. It was just a bit different. But then I kept pushing through and I would do my regular workouts. And right after my workouts, I would feel good. So what happened is some people who know about malaria, they know that when you have that virus, symptoms show pretty quickly. But for me, I carried that virus for at least 2 weeks in my body while I was in Cameroon. When I came back to Canada, I stayed another 2 weeks. I was still feeling a bit off, but I thought it was the difference in temperature, me just trying to adjust to the climate, the water, the food. And then one day at work, almost collapsed. My colleagues were like, you got to go home, man. You're not feeling good. So what happened really is that my sister, my brother, they tried to go to multiple hospitals with me. I started with my little sister. So we live in St. Boniface. So we went through a few hospitals. And just the looks, the way people would receive us, the way people would not even acknowledge us, was very interesting. I remember there was one particular hospital that we stopped at, and the guy just kept asking me questions about my sexual life, nothing to do with what I had. He didn't care about my condition. And I remember my sister telling him, don't you see that this guy is close to death? Like he's dying. I wasn't able to say a word. I wasn't able to walk. And you had my little sister, trying to carry me around in the city. And the guy just said, here's some tests. You got to go and do some tests here. And that's it. Boom, blood work and blah, blah, blah. So eventually we made it to Victoria Hospital near the University of Manitoba. And even there, we had to wait for hours. She passed me to my brother, and I was there with my brother for hours, like 12 hours, 13 hours. So we're still waiting. Finally, they got me in. And then after multiple questions, like blood work, lots of things, they finally understood that I had malaria. That was the conclusion of the doctor. You have malaria. It's nothing big. Tropical disease. You probably got it when you were in Cameroon. That's fine. What's interesting about my story is that if I was a normal person, I would have showed some symptoms while in Cameroon and I would have gotten, medication, treatment right away. And none of this would have ever happened. But I believe this was fate. This had to happen for me to understand what's happening in our society and actually go through it. So got into a room and I remember the nurse just being upset with me. I was asking for some more IV fluids because I didn't have food for like a few days.
Let me just interrupt you. Are you in Cameroon now or are you in Canada?
I'm in Canada. So like now I'm back. Yeah, so I'm back in Canada. Sorry. 2 weeks in Cameroon with the virus, came back to Canada, trying to address another 2 weeks, collapsed. And then my sister brings me to Victoria Hospital. This is in the Victoria Hospital. So I'm in the hospital and I'm with the nurse. And she's pretty upset. I'm asking for some more IV fluid. She brushed me off. And the reason she was upset is because I wasn't moving fast enough. I'm like, I can't move fast enough. I'm running on an empty stomach. I didn't have food for a long time. I haven't seen light in a long time. I just need to be a bit more patient with me. And she didn't want to hear it. So what happened is she just left the room and I didn't see her for 14 hours. That night, things got a bit worse. What was happening is as I'm calling for help, nobody's coming, nothing is happening. I sort of heard like someone was screaming in the hallway. Got out of my room and it was an indigenous woman being physically assaulted, by the people there, like just the doctors or all the group of people that are supposed to help us. And the woman is crying, asking for help, asking for the same thing that I was asking, some more medication, some more treatment. She's not getting it. Long story short, she got physically brutalized and kicked out of the hospital. Went back into my room. So I went back into my room and I was like, okay, if I keep asking here, if I keep asking for help, I might end up just like her. So I better keep quiet. That was really one of the first times where I felt like my voice didn't mean anything. I had to shut up and shut everything down. And in that moment, the only thing that I thought about doing was praying. Prayed God, and I told God, if you get me out of this situation, I promise you to dedicate my whole life, resources, anything that I have to the service of my community so that things like that do not continue happening in my community. Long story short, next morning, about 10 a.m., and this was happening. So the nurse left my room around 7 p.m. So this is the next morning around 10 a.m. One of my friends calls me and my family, everybody thinks I'm in good hands. Everybody thinks, it's only malaria, nothing big. He's in the hospital. They're taking care of him. So my sister is having, and this is just to put things in perspectives. My sister is having her gender reveal party. My mom is in Cameroon with my dad. They're having dinner. Everybody's sort of happy. No one knows what I'm going through that night. And then next morning, my friend comes to the hospital, calls me and says that, what is happening with you? They don't want me to see you. They're saying you're in isolation. Are you contagious? And I'm saying, no, malaria is not contagious. What's happening? So it's in that moment that I understood what the nurse did that night when she left my room. She placed me in isolation. So no one wanted to give me help because they all thought I was contagious. So I didn't receive treatment, medication, nothing for 14 hours because of that particular act. Anyway, he gets into my room after making some noise, and the doctors apologized to him, not to me. They apologized to him. And then he came into my room with the nurse, and I'm like, I got to get out of here. This is it. I survived. I feel good. I was feeling like 50%. I was like, this is good enough. This is better than zero. You got to get me out of here. They didn't want to let me out, but finally 2 hours after I got out of the hospital. And in that situation, I remembered my promise to God, but I was still in shock. I needed to deal with that. So one of my mom's friends, who is also the leader of Black and Proud, which is Noir et Fier, his name is Wilgis. He called me when he heard about the story and wanted me to go public with it, go to the media. And I remember telling him 2 years ago, it's not the right time. When time is right, I'll do it. And it seems like time has been right since last September because I've been talking about this story. In that moment, most people, the media, sometimes when they hear the story, they ask me, why did you conclude racism? Why was that the conclusion? Well, they knew what I had. The nurse, obviously, it was malaria. She gave me treatment. They knew how to treat me. But in that situation, she decided to put me in isolation, knowing I wasn't contagious, and to abandon me in that situation where I could have died. I got out of that thanks to a white friend, because the friend who called me was white. And I guess it's also a bit philosophical because it shows how even if we try to work just within the community, we still need help from other communities. That's allyship, that's also why I value allyship. So in that situation, having my life being saved, not by a member of my family, but by a friend who's from the white community really meant a lot for me. And that's why I guess discrimination, racism, I see that concept a bit differently today. So Pretty much what came out of that was me starting a business, like I've said, SCB Fitness, which is essentially supporting my community, empowering the community from a physical, mental, psychological, and spiritual standpoints. Because I realized that someone as healthy as me, who's been in the fitness industry for over 8 years, could have died easily in a hospital like that. So it's not just about the physical, it's also about the mental, the psychological side of things. And it's to really help people be aware. And I'm using fitness as a vehicle.
So just go back a little bit, Stanislaus. You're in the hospital. That you're in intensive care. You don't know that, right? Nobody mentioned that to you. You're intensive care. And how is it that you were finally able to get discharged? What went down to get you to the point where they said, okay, you can leave the hospital?
I didn't give them a choice. I sort of regained some energy and I was a 240-pound guy. So I guess if I'm telling them I'm leaving, I don't think they could stop me. I was telling them that I was good. I would feel I need to leave the hospital. They prescribed like a few more medication, a few more things. They said, you have to take this, this, and that. I said, no problem, but I gotta go. This is not the place for me anymore. I've been here for about a couple of nights. I gotta go. So I left.
And you obviously made a full recovery, but what is when you left, where did you go home? What did you do?
Yeah, I went home. It was kind of the third day of treatment. So I went home. I finished treatment from home. And that was it. My family doctor from Cameroon, because we have a family doctor also in Cameroon, called me and sort of told me what I should be doing to recover faster, which I did. So they gave me treatment here, plus advices from my doctor in Cameroon, and things kind of worked out pretty well for me.
So, that's a very challenging, situation to go through. And it's important to talk about it, because you not only, did you feel obviously racism in terms of how you were being treated, but you witnessed it with a indigenous woman.
Yes, yes, yes. That was brutal. I've never seen that. To me, when you go to a hospital, and this is sort of what people don't understand, is when you go to a hospital, you think this is where you're going to get treatment, attention, and maybe a bit of love. Why not? You're suffering. So you expect that. But when you go through these kind of situations and you see the opposite, it changes the mindset because we hear these stories here and there. And sometimes we just hear that people die, and this is sort of what put things in perspectives for me is that most people go through experiences like that, and one of two things happen. Either die, and then we never hear about them, about what really transpired, or they go home and they just traumatized and they don't want to talk about it, which kind of happened to me for like a year. I didn't really want to talk about it because you're trying to deal with that situation, but that's not the solution. You want to get out of silence. You want to bring awareness. You want to talk about these things so that people know that the solution is not to be quiet because silence is the same thing as death. So seeing that treatment, that women being physically assaulted in a hospital, to me just changed my perspectives. We need to do, there's a lot of work to be done. There's so many things we could be doing as we speak. There's a lot of things we could be doing. So that's not right. That's not right for sure.
Was, just coming back to this woman, do you know how that ended? What was the outcome of that?
She got kicked out of the hospital and it got quiet very quickly. And that was it. What's funny is that some of my clients are also from the indigenous community. So I've had an opportunity to really interact with these people. And when they hear this story, nobody's shocked. For them, it's like, yeah, this is pretty much what we go through. This is the situation. This is our reality. So I'm not saying that they think it's normal, but it's not surprising anymore. It's not shocking anymore. What is shocking to me is that we have a lot of people who are silent. And I understand that. And that's why I'm really thinking if I was put in this position, I was blessed sometimes with platforms, sometimes with the opportunities to share my stories and to inspire other people. There's no way I can remain silent. And that's sort of what helped me start my business, wanting to be involved with the community, working with Black history, being even more engaged at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Because it's not about what also happened there, it's more about what we can contribute to the society. And, I wanted to leave a couple of times, the museum. But when I understood that it was an important platform for people in these communities that are going through injustices on a consistent basis, I realized that me being there, as I was telling you when we started, is also just like it's hope. It represents hope for my community.
So, have you had to go to a hospital since?
No, 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 obviously not. Obviously not. I mean, I've been very blessed, because I take my health, nutrition very seriously. I kind of have to because of my job, my work, my business. And as a result, I haven't been sick. And even if I feel anything, that's not the place where I would go. I would stay home, sleep, drink some water, and that's it, you know.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, no kidding. So, Stanislaus, you started a business. Tell me the name of your business again.
SCB Fitness.
SCB Fitness.
S is for strength, C is for curiosity, and B is for boldness.
Okay, SCB Fitness. And it's more than just a physical workout space.
It is more than that. It's a concept because I talked about being strong with the S, being strong physically, mentally, psychologically, being curious, wanting to learn, education, awareness, and being bold, meaning having the courage of your conviction, having the courage to fight against racism and discrimination. So it's really a business to empower and galvanize communities in general, starting with my own community.
And what are some of the things that this is a great opportunity for you to just give a commercial plug to what you do? So, what would somebody learn? And presumably, you get all genders attending?
Yeah, for sure. So how it works is I offer personal coaching programs to clients in general. And these opportunities are a moment where we can reinforce them from a physical and a mental standpoint. So that's what happens there. Also, when I get invited to different platforms to share about my stories, that's also me representing SCB Fitness specifically for youth, because that's the work I'm really keen on doing that work. I'm really focused on, galvanizing the youth. This summer, for example, and I've been working on this project, I'm opening a summer camp. It's a 5-year project, and the summer camp is for the youth in the Black community. This year, we're starting specifically and exclusively with the Black community, age 13 to 16. We're offering the program for kids who don't necessarily have the opportunity to interact with a program of this nature. The program has two key pillars. One is fitness, obviously. That's what I do. And number two is we're inviting different guest speakers from different nature, from different positions in life, different communities, to really interact with the kids, share their stories, galvanize the kids, inspire the kids. Because I know I've been in those shoes. When you're a young kid and you're just a youth and you don't understand what society is prepping for you in the future, you want to be prepped. You want to be ready. You want to hear about some of those messages of hope, what to do. And if we invite, CEOs, MLAs, people that I've been in contact with, in connections with, to really share some of their stories with the kids, I think it'll go a long way. I said it's not just a 1-year program, it's a 5-year program. So we're starting a bit small this year with about 20 kids, 10 in the Francophone community and 10 in the Anglophone community. I've been working with different corporates. I've been in touch with different corporates, different businesses, different individuals to sort of collect sponsorships for the kids so they don't have to pay for it. So we'll start this summer, then we'll have some sort of follow up of the kid until next year. And the goal is really to expand with different activities, not just fitness and motive and inspirational talks, but also have different activities for the kids and also partner up with different communities, not just the Black community, but also I talked about allyship and how it's important, but having a space where we can have a mix of different communities and show them what allyship means.
Sounds amazing. Where do you have a location that you're going to do?
Yeah, we have a location already. Right now, I'm recruiting the kids, the 20 kids, obviously, and then also finalizing some of the sponsorship requests that I've made over the last few months. So the location is on Archibald. It's a gym. It's the gym where I usually have all my sessions with my clients. That gym in August, this summer for 4 weeks, we'll have space, we'll have time for us to go through with the program. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So anyone who wants to be involved, anyone wants to support, anyone wants to sponsor a kid, things like that. I've sort of been very open because I didn't want to have one sponsor to do the whole thing. I wanted to show that the community can come together and we can have different communities, different people, different realities coming together to support an initiative of this nature.
And if they want to do that, you've got a website?
I don't have a website. They just have to contact me directly. The way I see things is in the future, I mean, obviously we're growing. How it works right now is that I'm the kind of guy who doesn't like to wait. We identify something that we could do to support the community. We got to do it. I have the support of Black History Manitoba, obviously. So people can either contact Black History Manitoba directly because they have a website. And like I said, I'm a member, or they can contact me directly. I'll give you my contacts for the people who are listening.
Yeah, and well, I'll put it into the notes if people are interested, to Stanislas. So that's amazing.
But one quick thing just to say, the way it works is if an individual, if a corporate wants to sponsor a kid, it's $500 per kid.
Right. Okay. And the idea is that you've made this so that it is free for the kids.
It is free. Yeah. So let's say worst case scenario, I didn't have anything, any budget, any money for this, it would still happen because this is happening regardless of, what kind of resources that we'll have, at that particular time. So it's happening. It's free for the kids. Like I said, I'm sort of hiring the kids for this summer. We'll make sure to have a follow-up until next summer. But because of some of the excitement, the momentum that this initiative has been creating, and I'm really happy to see that. It seems like I might have to offer another program in the winter, like a winter camp, because there's a lot of people wanting to be involved, and I appreciate that obviously.
That's a great sign. It's a great sign as you're getting, I mean, lots of conversation and interest, which is fantastic, right? So I know it's a bit of a rabbit hole, but let me just ask this, because you're bilingual, because you're looking at 10 French students, 10 English students, is it going to be kind of a bilingual class teaching, or how are you going to structure that?
So the way it works is I got four groups of five. That means two groups in English, two groups in French. I want to have like French, English. And when I invite the speakers, I have speakers who speak both languages, who speak French only, or who speak English only. And I have so many speakers wanting to be part of this that I could have a speaker every day of the program, to come in and have conversations with the kids. So I could invite you as well. You would be great. That's for sure.
Yeah, you know what? Give me a shot. Give me a chance. I'm happy to help out, Stanislas. That's fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about something that you talked at the outset. I'll just say it's a bold statement. It's an important statement. When you talked about the fact that you're manager of visitor services at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, but you also were very, very strongly suggesting and very proud to say that you're the first Black manager of power at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Why is that important, Stanislas, to make that comment?
It's important because for my community, it's important to have representation. This is a problem that we've had all over Canada. I mean, I guess even in the US, in different countries, the lack of representation. And because I've been in the inside, I've seen it with my own eyes. I know how hard it is to get in those positions. I've seen the system from behind. I've seen some of the little things that happen behind the scenes and why people feel discouraged. I've seen lots of people come through the museum and leave right away. Some people, and the comment is always the same. I've been in meetings with, Black History Manitoba. I've been in meetings with people in the Black community, and the feedback has always been the same. We don't feel like we belong in this building. It's a beautiful building. It's amazing, amazing content, but we don't feel like we belong for a couple of reasons. There's no representation. There's no deliberate invitation. We're not, inviting people the right way. And to me, it's always like, if you want to invite a culture or a group of people that you don't know, you send one of theirs. You don't send someone who doesn't know the culture. So if you invite me, but if someone that doesn't know my culture was inviting me, it's almost like an insult. It's almost like disrespectful. So there's been a lot of things that have happened. Obviously, we grew from that with our new CEO, Aisha, and some of the things that she has inspired, she has motivated, the way she's been, approaching relationship building and things of that nature. It has made us stronger and better. And for me, when people see that someone like me, can be a manager in a place like that where people don't see themselves, where people, after the scandal that happened a few years ago, people call that place a racist place. Seeing someone like me in that position gives hope. That means human rights are not just political. There is obviously opportunities for us to grow, to understand. And I'm proud also to say that I represent the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, not just for my community, but for what we also stand for, wanting to build a world where people can have conversations, can understand each other, can be educated about human rights. I think that's important. So when I make that statement, it's also because when I walk into that building every day, I don't necessarily walk into that building as Stanislas, the manager. I also walk into that building as a member of the community, someone who represents the community and someone who wants to invite the community into the museum.
The years you mentioned, sort of the challenges that the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, I know there was a study that was done on it. Those years were, do you recall what those years were, Stanislas, when that happened?
Right when COVID started.
Yeah, so 2020. Because obviously for most people that know me, I was the inaugural president and CEO of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights from '09 to 14 after I left. And I'm very sensitive to the comments that you're making because I understand how important they were at that time. Can you share with us, just from your perspective, some of the challenges that you're dealing with as a manager of visitor services during COVID?
I think, I don't think I know. When you're in a situation of stress, people don't always, react in a positive way. And what we sort of observed during COVID is that because the museum was also going through something very sensitive, there were claims of discrimination, racism. There was an investigation there. It was sort of like a dark time for the museum. So you have COVID, which is affecting the whole world, and it's massive, and people are going a bit, crazy about it. And then you also have the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, who was also undergoing some investigation as a result of discrimination, racism. It just didn't sit well. It didn't feel good. It was interesting navigating some of the conversations we had with the public. In my position specifically, vaccination and things of that nature, the vaccine mandate, all of that, it was hard. It was complex, it was complicated and complex at the same time because there was no way. So the museum had to follow some of the rules, provincial rules about people having to get vaccinated in order to get into the museum. And you had people feeling like it was the right not to be vaccinated. It was the right not to take the vaccine. And as a result, they would come to the museum and complain. They would make scenes. They would bring, cameras, and they will record different scenes, sort of, trying to expose the museum from a different angle, not understanding some of the obligations that we had to follow as well, because it wasn't just about the museum. It was about any institution in Winnipeg, in Canada, having to follow the rules if we wanted to be open. So the way we sort of looked at it was that we want the public to interact with the content. That's the mission, is for people to get educated and get awareness. We develop virtual content, we develop online content, virtual programs and products for people that were not able to come into the building. But it was important for us to keep our doors open, So that's when the decision was made to go ahead and enforce one of, the rules about, the vaccine. And people are not always going to be happy. We understand that. But for the greater good, for, the majority of people, having to stay open and operational for folks to come into the building was important. That was a priority. So I understand. And I think two things can be true. It's people, it's totally, it's your right. If you don't want to be vaccinated, that's fine. However, we also have to follow the rules in order for us to still make that amazing product available to the public. And we go two steps further by offering some virtual content to folks so that people don't feel like they don't have access to knowledge as a result of that rule. So that's sort of how we kind of navigated that, and keeping the team motivated, organized, galvanized during that dark time was tough. Because you would have those conversations, people would be angry, and you would understand why. but it's sort of how do you maneuver yourself in a way that doesn't show disrespect to the person who is coming to the museum, but at the same time, you show some empathy. We have to support each other.
Yeah. So, in other words, I think, we're all aware that a lot of institutions or different places, public spaces, would not allow people in if they weren't able to show a sort of sense that they were vaccinated. Right. And so that would be the same at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. If you weren't vaccinated, you weren't allowed physically in the building. But as you say, you offered opportunities for them to learn virtually and other options. It wasn't just sort of saying, you can't come in, period, full stop. You tried to make sure that there was an opportunity to respect their decision and allow them still to learn about human rights.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, in the world that we live right now, we know that virtual tools or online resources, that's the way to go now. That's how you expand your reach. And even today, we have schools that don't need to be there in person, they attend the museum virtually. That is just, there's just crazy stats about that. The number of people that we can welcome to the museum, not just in person, but overall, it's amazing. And that's how you see, that's how we contribute to the community. It's not about the rule, it's about the goal.
And Stanislas, if somebody mentioned or asked you the question saying, you're the manager of visitor services at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, how do you feel from a human rights perspective that I don't want to get vaccinated, but I feel I should be able to have the right to come into the building?
That's where I draw the line is you have the right not to get vaccinated. That's for sure. But rules and policies are put in place for a reason. Is to protect, everybody, and being healthy or knowing there is a sense of health. There's some healthy measures being put in place to protect most people. I think that's what is more important at that particular time. We're going through something that is not just the reality of Winnipeg or the reality of Canadian Museum for Human Rights. It's a reality of the whole world. So it's sort of like explaining this to people. I got vaccinated. I didn't want to necessarily, but I had to. And I felt like, okay, it is what it is. What's more important to me at that particular time is to be available for my teams, to be available for the museum, is to make sure we continue to offer this product and we continue on the path of the mission and the vision.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, that's a good answer. I think you captured the vast majority of the sentiment of how people felt about it. And, I don't know what the next sort of issue that will come forward that will be similar. I'm sure there will be something like that, but you always have to look at what your moral compass and what your human right values are and try and sort of put that in. It's, again, I think we all agree that one of the things that, the difference between what's right and what's wrong and what's your personal value and what you look at as a human right, sometimes those things can be pretty messy.
That's true. It's about respecting also boundaries and understanding people. And it's always funny because it's not just about COVID. Every day, someone try to come into the museum and make up a rights. Like I have the right not to use my phone if I don't want to for online ticketing, for example, or I have the right. Like there's difference between rules, between a system and between your right. We're not trying to deny your rights in general, but you need to be educated about what it means.
Yes, sure. I mean, again, it's interesting you just share that story because I do think that, the world is full of people who want to establish a right on some issue and use it as a human right. And, that's just part of where we are as a democracy, right? Where there's opportunities and see all those things go down. Stanislas, thank you so much for this. I want to make sure that when I asked you to come on here on our podcast, I was thrilled and delighted because I know you've got a very interesting background, which you shared, and I appreciate that. But I just wondered if there's anything I didn't ask you that you might want to talk about on this podcast.
I like that question. I don't like it at the same time because I could speak for hours, but I'm just gonna keep it short and on a positive note because there's so many things that are happening right now in the world. When you open the media, you check on the TV, check the news, and you have people who are always discombobulated because they see something that they didn't expect could be true. My message really for people and for the people around me in my life is leadership is important, obviously. My definition of leadership is being able to transform anything that's negative into something that's positive. And leadership is also being able to build some leaders for the future, which is why I've told you about the work that I do with the youth. We want to invest in our community. I love deeply this community of Winnipeg, this community of Manitoba. We have some amazing people here that are ready to support. We have some amazing young folks that are ready to step up and be ready to handle the problems that will come with the next generations. But it's also our job. Us people now will listen to podcasts like this. People will go to museums. People will see what's happening in the world to take the matter into our own hands. There's always something we can do, you know. And it's a message of hope. It's a message of positivity. It's a message of inspiration that I really want to bring to the world, really want to bring to my community and show that you could be a Black man with, dreadlocks or braids. It doesn't matter. The look doesn't matter. It's what you have inside of you. I got judged a lot along the way. And that's why I'm telling you, it's important for me to see that I'm the first person in position of power at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, because the look, when people look at you and they sort of create a story about you, that can affect you in a negative way. And I was on the receiving end of that. And I've been on the receiving end of that multiple times. The way you present yourself, sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. You want to express who you are as long as you're respectful to others, but it can always create some judgment. It's not about what people think. It's about what you think about yourself. And that's sort of the message I really want to push there, because folks in my community come to me and they're surprised how someone with dreadlocks, earrings, the look that I have can be in the position that I am. And it's because of work. I believe in the vision. I believe in sort of getting all the communities working together. And I believe in the message of love. And I think no matter what happens, you just got to keep working. You just got to keep, believing in that. And one day you'll see the light. And that's what happened to me. And I'm just saying it's just the beginning. So many things to come. Like I said, I'll share my contact. I really want to be open to the community. I want people, and I'm not forcing people to work with me, obviously. There are different things that people could be involved with or involved in. What I really want to do is, if folks sort of think that this is something they want to be involved in, they want to work with, they want to participate in, we're open and we're ready to work with everybody.
Yeah, sounds great. It's a great way to sort of wrap up this conversation. So, Stanislas Bell, thank you so much for being on Humans on Rights. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate your insight, your honesty, your passion, your hope, and your love of the community.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you as well.